What happens when a comedian known for his razor-sharp political satire sits down with America's sweetheart talk show host, and the conversation takes a turn nobody saw coming? You're about to find out, because Randy Rainbow just had what many are calling the most explosive interview meltdown in daytime television history. Before diving into this train wreck, audiences were urged to subscribe and comment because what followed was nothing short of shocking. Asterisk. Randy Rainbow sat across from Kelly Clarkson on her vibrant, colorful talk show set. At first, the atmosphere felt light and friendly. Kelly greeted him with her trademark warmth, while Randy's theatrical charm was fully on display. The opening moments were filled with easy banter, laughter, and mutual compliments. But the tone shifted when Kelly posed what sounded like an innocent question. She acknowledged the popularity of Randy's political parodies, then asked whether he ever worried about going too far with his content. Asterisk. Randy shifted in his chair, his expression tightening. He responded that reality itself had already gone too far and that his work simply reflected the absurdity of the times. Kelly followed up, noting that some people felt his videos crossed lines, particularly when he targeted specific politicians so harshly. At that moment, Randy's smile faded completely. Comedy, he said, has always been about pushing boundaries and questioning that felt unnecessary. Asterisk. Kelly leaned forward, her tone growing more serious. She suggested that having such a large platform came with responsibility and that some of his content could feel divisive. Randy pushed back sharply, arguing that calling out corruption and incompetence wasn't divisive, it was necessary. He questioned why she felt entitled to lecture him on responsibility while hosting a show built around celebrity gossip and consumer culture. The audience began murmuring as the tension thickened. Asterisk. Kelly tried to clarify, saying she wasn't criticizing him, only asking questions. Randy wasn't convinced. He accused her of inviting him on the show to promote his work and then attempting to shame him for the very thing that made him successful. He labeled it classic mainstream media behavior. When Kelly defended herself by saying her questions reflected audience curiosity, Randy shot back that there was a difference between the audience and network executives and that they both knew it. Asterisk. The exchange grew more heated as Kelly suggested finding common ground rather than always choosing the most provocative angle. Randy laughed bitterly, saying that calling for common ground while one side dismantled democracy wasn't balance, it was complicity. Kelly described that as an extreme viewpoint, but Randy countered that what was truly extreme was pretending all sides deserved equal consideration while the world burned. Asterisk. Kelly's composure began to crack as she insisted she was only trying to have a reasonable conversation. Randy rejected that framing and launched into a critique of daytime television itself, calling it a sanitized, corporate-approved wasteland where authenticity was sacrificed to keep advertisers comfortable. The studio fell silent as the confrontation escalated. Asterisk. Attempting to regain control, Kelly suggested moving on to Randy's upcoming projects. That only fueled his frustration. He accused her of interrogating him about responsibility and then trying to change the subject once he pushed back. Kelly denied interrogating him, saying she was aiming for an interesting discussion. Randy questioned who it was really interesting for the producers, the network, or an audience hungry for something real instead of fluff. Asterisk. Kelly took a deep breath, visibly trying to steady herself. Randy accused her of staging an ambush disguised as friendly conversation, pointing out that she knew exactly what his content was like before booking him. He questioned why anyone was surprised that he had strong opinions. The interview had completely derailed, with both host and guest locked in an increasingly intense exchange. Asterisk. Kelly attempted damage control, insisting her questions came from genuine curiosity, not criticism. Randy responded with biting sarcasm, explaining what genuine curiosity would actually look like: questions about his creative process, inspirations, and artistic journey, not accusations of being too harsh toward politicians harming people. Kelly replied that with millions of followers, questions about impact were inevitable. Randy seized on that word, launching into a broader critique of media culture. He spoke about the danger of normalizing authoritarianism by treating it as just another opinion, and criticized the way serious issues were softened to fit the tone of morning television. Kelly pushed back, saying her show covered serious topics. Regularly, Randy challenged that claim, accusing the show of addressing issues superficially to appear socially conscious without ever challenging viewers to think deeply. By now, the studio audience was visibly uncomfortable. Some shifted in their seats, while others discreetly pulled out phones to record the unfolding drama. Kelly insisted Randy was mischaracterizing her show. He fired back, asking when the last truly uncomfortable conversation had taken place on her stage when a guest wasn't allowed to hide behind rehearsed talking points. Kelly's tone sharpened. As she said, she asked tough questions when appropriate. Randy questioned who decided what was appropriate: lawyers, executives, advertisers, and argued that none of them cared about what the current moment actually demanded. Kelly finally pushed back, saying he was being unfair and didn't understand how she ran her show or the conversations she worked to create. And with that, what began as a friendly interview had transformed into one of the most uncomfortable and talked about confrontations daytime television had seen in years. Behind the scenes, Randy repeated, "That's exactly the problem, Kelly. All the real conversations happen behind the scenes while the audience gets fed this manufactured positivity that has nothing to do with reality." Kelly took a visible deep breath, trying to regain control. She said she understood that Randy was passionate about his work and respected that. But attacking her personally wasn't productive. Randy immediately pushed back, clarifying that he wasn't attacking her as a person. He was attacking a system that she happened to be very successful within, and he insisted there was a difference. Kelly pointed out that he was sitting on her show, essentially telling her that everything she did amounted to meaningless corporate propaganda. Randy responded that daytime television had become a vehicle for avoiding real conversations about real problems. And if that description applied to her show, then maybe it was worth examining. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. From behind the cameras, Kelly's producer could be seen frantically gesturing. Kelly said she had invited Randy because she thought he was funny and talented, not because she wanted to be lectured about the state of media. Randy replied that he had come because he thought, just maybe, someone in mainstream media actually wanted to have a real conversation about why comedy matters in dark times. He added that it seemed he had been wrong. Kelly's voice grew more defensive as she accused him of making assumptions about her intentions and her show. Randy challenged her to prove him wrong. He asked her to ask something real, something that mattered. He urged her to ask why humor was one of the last offenses against fascism, instead of asking him to justify his existence as an artist. Kelly reacted to the word fascism, saying it was an extreme term to use. Randy's eyes widened in disbelief. He told her that this reaction was exactly the problem. He argued that she found the word extreme, but not the policies and behaviors that defined it. He called it willful blindness. Kelly denied being blind, saying only that people should be careful with inflammatory language. Randy countered that what was truly inflammatory was pretending that naming something accurately was worse than the thing itself. He said tone policing people who were sounding the alarm while everything burned was part of the problem. The audience sat in complete silence, hanging on every word as the confrontation shifted into a full philosophical battle. Kelly said Randy was being unfair to her and to her audience, insisting they cared about these issues as well. Randy replied that caring and actually addressing issues were two very different things. Caring was easy, he said. Action required risk, and risk was bad for ratings. Kelly's professional composure was visibly strained as she accused him of implying that everyone in mainstream media was a coward. Randy clarified that mainstream media operated within constraints that made real courage nearly impossible, and that included her show and the conversation they were having in that moment. Kelly processed his words, her expression hardening. She asked if he was saying the conversation was fake or meaningless simply because it was happening on her show. Randy said they were having the conversation within a framework designed to prevent it from going anywhere that actually mattered. He said they were performing authenticity rather than truly being authentic. Kelly insisted she was being completely genuine. Randy challenged that, saying the real Kelly probably had strong opinions about the state of the world but talk show. Host Kelly had to stay neutral, palatable, and brand safe. He asked which Kelly he was talking to. The question hung in the air. Kelly's jaw tightened before she finally snapped back, saying he was being arrogant. She accused him of walking onto her show and attacking everything about it without knowing anything about her or what she believed. Randy smiled slightly and said that now they were getting somewhere. He invited her to say what she actually believed, not what the network wanted, not what the audience expected, but what she truly thought about the world. Kelly paused, clearly weighing her words. She said she believed the world was complicated, and that reducing everything to good guys and bad guys made for good comedy but didn't help solve real problems. Randy rejected that framing, saying some things weren't complicated at all. Overturning elections, caging children, and habitual lying were not complex moral puzzles. Kelly pushed back, suggesting that black and white thinking was what divided the country. Randy looked stunned and asked if she was serious. He questioned whether the problem was people being too judgmental of objectively terrible behavior and whether the solution was to be more understanding of cruelty and corruption. Kelly said the solution was to bring people together rather than driving them further apart. Randy responded that you couldn't bring people together with fascists or find middle ground with people who wanted to strip others of their rights. He said this wasn't about tax policy, but about basic human dignity. Kelly raised her voice, arguing that this kind of rhetoric made productive conversations impossible with anyone who didn't already agree. Randy asked what a productive conversation with someone who believed certain groups shouldn't have rights was supposed to look like. Kelly answered that it meant trying to understand where they were coming from instead of immediately labeling them as evil. Randy stared at her in disbelief. He said he understood exactly where they were coming from: fear, hatred, and ignorance, and that understanding didn't require respect or accommodation. Kelly suggested that his attitude perpetuated division. Randy shot back that what perpetuated division was pretending hatred and love were equally valid perspectives. He accused her of promoting false equivalency, both sides thinking, and moral relativism. The studio was now completely silent except for the occasional uncomfortable cough. Kelly denied advocating moral relativism and said she was advocating for basic human decency and common ground. Randy replied that human decency meant standing up to bullies, not trying to understand them, and protecting vulnerable people rather than compromising with their oppressors. Kelly accused him of putting words in her mouth. Randy countered that it sounded like she was more concerned with being polite to dangerous people than protecting those they harmed. Kelly denied that accusation. Randy asked her to clarify what she was saying, because from his perspective, it sounded like she wanted him to tone down his criticism to avoid discomfort or making the show seem too political. Kelly suggested his approach might not be as effective as he believed. Randy's anger flared. He said his work had reached millions and helped people process the trauma of living through one of the darkest political eras in modern history. He asked what her approach had accomplished beyond keeping people comfortable while everything fell apart. Asterisk. Kelly defended herself by saying her show brought joy and positivity during difficult times. Randy replied that there was a difference between bringing joy and enabling denial, a difference between positivity and refusing to confront reality. Randy finished his thought by calling it toxic optimism. Kelly stood up abruptly, her voice rising as she told him he needed to check himself. She accused him of being deeply disrespectful to her, her show, and her audience. Randy stood as well, matching her energy as the studio lights seemed to intensify the heat of the moment. The two faced each other across the coffee table, the tension unmistakable. Kelly's voice trembled with barely contained frustration as she accused him of projecting centrist nonsense onto her. She insisted he had no idea what she personally believed and was making sweeping judgments based on nothing. Randy shot back that his judgments were based on exactly what she had shown him during the conversation. He said she had spent the entire interview trying to make him apologize for having strong convictions about right and wrong. Kelly denied that, saying she had only asked him to consider that his approach wasn't the only way to create positive change. Asterisk. Randy threw his hands up in frustration. He argued that positive change required acknowledging when things were wrong, not finding ways to make everyone feel better about terrible situations. Kelly questioned whether insulting and mocking people would ever make them see the light. Randy responded that holding people accountable mattered more than protecting their feelings and that truth mattered more than comfort. Kelly pushed back, saying it was Randy's truth, his interpretation, that he presented it as the only valid perspective. Randy countered that when it came to basic human rights and democratic principles, there was only one acceptable way to see things. Kelly insisted that everything was a matter of opinion in a democracy. Randy stared at her in disbelief and said, "That wasn't true. The Earth being round, gravity existing, and attempting to overturn elections being wrong were facts, not opinions." He said the real choice lay in how people responded to those facts, and he chose urgency over pretending everything was fine. Kelly shook her head, insisting no one was pretending everything was fine, but yelling at people solved nothing. Randy replied that he wasn't yelling. He was using humor and satire to expose absurdity and corruption. If that felt like yelling to her, he suggested she ask herself why. Kelly said his approach was aggressive, divisive, and pushed people away. Randy said that was the point. Some people deserved to be pushed away, and not every perspective deserved a seat at the table. Kelly warned that this kind of absolutist thinking was dangerous. Randy responded that what was truly dangerous was giving platforms to people who spread misinformation and hate while tone policing those who called it out. Kelly pointed at him and said it was also dangerous to create content that made people angrier instead of helping them find solutions. Randy replied that the solution was for good people to stop being polite to bad people, and for those with platforms to stop pretending neutrality was a virtue. Kelly accused him of twisting her words. Randy insisted he was hearing her clearly. He said she was labeling his comedy as problematic because it took sides, framing resistance to authoritarianism as divisive, and treating accountability as inflammatory. Kelly denied saying any of that, but Randy argued she had spent the entire interview fixating on his tone while ignoring the substance of his message. Kelly said she had been trying to have a thoughtful discussion about political comedy. Randy accused her of trying to get him to admit he was part of the problem so she could feel better about her own complicity. Kelly's voice cracked as she told him he knew nothing about her life, her values, or what she did off camera. Randy replied that what mattered was what she did on camera, and that she used her platform to promote safe, sanitized content that never truly challenged anyone. Kelly called that accusation unfair. Randy began gathering his things and said, "What was truly unfair was living in a country where comedians had to tell the truth because journalists and talk show hosts wouldn't." Kelly asked where he was going. Randy said he was leaving because the conversation made it clear they lived in completely different realities, and he refused to pretend her reality was equally valid. Kelly's voice turned desperate as she asked him not to leave and suggested they could still have a constructive conversation. Randy turned back and said construction required a foundation, and they didn't even agree on basic facts. Kelly suggested listening and understanding different perspectives. Randy said he had listened and heard her clearly. She thought he was too angry, too divisive, and too unwilling to compromise with people who wanted to harm others. Kelly denied that was what she believed. Randy asked her directly what she genuinely thought about the state of the world, not what her audience wanted to hear or what felt appropriate. Kelly hesitated, the silence stretching as cameras captured her internal struggle. Finally, she said, she believed the country needed healing. Randy shook his head sadly and said that wasn't an answer, was a talking point. He said her inability to give a real answer proved everything he had been saying. With that, he turned and walked off the set, leaving Kelly standing alone as the audience watched in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing one of the most dramatic walk-offs in daytime television history. And just like that, a friendly interview collapsed into a cultural flashpoint. The confrontation left viewers divided, questioning whether Randy was right to challenge the system so fiercely or whether he crossed a line that could never be uncrossed.